now breathing fire. Hours after US Speaker Nancy Pelosi left Taiwan, China has blasted off its missiles and launched its long-range rockets into the waters surrounding Taiwan. Since early this morning, massive Chinese military exercises are underway. Taiwan says 11 PLA DongFeng ballistic missiles were fired. The Chinese military is going to flex its muscles for the next 3 days, and then there is a very real fear of an even bigger escalation.
The dragon has bared its fangs, and it's raining missiles, long-range rockets and more at the Taiwan waters. Chinese military propaganda has peaked hours after US Speaker Nancy Pelosi left Taiwan after a 15-hour whirlwind tour. Beijing's state-sponsored media is flooding the internet with videos of military drills being carried out near Taiwan. The Taiwanese Defense Ministry has confirmed that the Chinese army launched at least 11 DongFeng ballistic missiles into waters surrounding the northern, southern and eastern parts of Taiwan. A brigade of China's PLA 80th Group Army also carried out a live fire assessment of heavy firearms rapid strike. Over the next 3 days, the Chinese army will carry its large-scale military exercise in 6 waters around Taiwan. From land to air. 27 Chinese warplanes flew into Taiwan's air defense zone on Wednesday. They include 6 J-11 air superiority fighter jets, 5 J-16 multirole fighter jets, and 16 Su-30 air superiority fighters. Taiwan has said that Chinese fighter jets were warned on the radio the moment they crossed the median between mainland China and Taiwan. The Taiwanese waters too are heating up. Both Chinese and US warships have been circling Taiwan amid Chinese anger over Pelosi's visit to the island. US has deployed 4 warships, including an aircraft carrier. US Navy carrier USS Ronald Reagan is conducting operations in Philippines Sea. Bureau Report, India Today.
To get a sense of what people in Taiwan think of the mounting tensions between Taiwan and China, we're joined on this broadcast by Wang Ting-yu, Member of Parliament in Taiwan, member of the Foreign Affairs and National Defense Committees, one of the most prominent legislators from Taiwan. Thank you very much, Mr. Ting-yu, for joining us on India Today.
It's my honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me here.
And before I start, I must just say that every person watching, and I say with a lot of confidence, in India, stands at this moment with the people and the country of Taiwan. So, we're all looking at what's happening with a lot of concern, and the people of India support the people of Taiwan and their cause quite strongly.
Yes. Today there are 11 missiles shot by China toward Taiwan into 3 different places, northeast of Taiwan and southeast of Taiwan and the east. Although it's a little bit far from Taiwan island itself, but it's the first time since 1996 China they launched the missile toward Taiwan. So the situation is a little bit intense right now, but we have confidence we can keep the situation under control.
But given just the size of the opponent and the difference in the military and economic capabilities of China and Taiwan, what gives you this confidence? We're seeing how the people in Ukraine are so heroically fighting back against Russian aggression. But how is it and why is it that you have confidence that against a country that thinks of itself as the new world superpower, that the people and country of Taiwan can stand up and fight back and at least stare the dragon in the eye?
Yeah, my dear India friends, Taiwan, we have faced China's threat for decades. Chinese threat, military threat, is real, concrete, huge, day after day, every day. So some people ask Taiwanese people, say, is that worth to let Pelosi visit Taiwan than China using military to bully Taiwan? And our answer is, no matter who is visiting Taiwan, China is using their military force to threaten Taiwan every day, every day. So even Pelosi is not visiting Taiwan. Chinese fighters harass our Southeast ADIZ every day. So first of all, I have to say, something can be compromised, but something cannot be cannot be exchanged for peace. For example, if Taiwan allow China has a right to approve who can visit Taiwan, who cannot, how Taiwan engage the international society? If we allow China has a veto right, or if we allow China has a right to approve it or not, then Taiwan will enter a situation of a catastrophe. And you referred about confidence. Taiwan and Ukraine is quite different scenario. First, Ukraine and Russia, they are land connected. Taiwan, we have Taiwan Strait, separates Taiwan and China. The narrowest part of Taiwan Strait is 170 kilometers. So amphibious invasion is quite different with Ukrainian situation. Secondly, we have prepared for China's military threat for years. So maybe China is a strong country. Maybe China, they have a very powerful military force. But Taiwan, we are trying to protect our homeland. We have prepared for this kind of challenge. And the third part is, Taiwan is a country with democracy. We love, we pray, we cherish the way how we live. In Taiwan, with 23 million people, we can elect our president to our city councilman. That's the way how we live. Democracy, human rights, and freedom. So we have the confidence by loving our country. And we have enhanced our military capacity in the past several years. So we don't want military conflict to happen. We hope we can keep peace. But if China dare to launch invasion to Taiwan, maybe they will pay the price they cannot afford, and eventually they will fail. And the whole world, democracies, they are standing with Taiwan. So international atmosphere, the geography conditions, and the preparation of Taiwanese military, all these factors plus Taiwanese determination, I don't think China invading Taiwan is a good idea for Beijing.
But what we can see happening at this moment, with the Chinese vessels sailing so close off the Taiwanese coast, violating the norm of 12 nautical miles, China is essentially trying to shed any notion of Taiwan being an independent country worthy of its own nautical borders. They're basically trying to say that we don't recognize China as having any independent identity, and they seem to have upped the ante on their military maneuvers after Speaker Pelosi's visit.
Yeah. First, I have to say, Taiwan has never been controlled, governed by China for a single second. Never. China has never governed Taiwan for one single second. So Taiwan is not part of China. They know that. We know that. The whole world knows that. But no, something in the international society is unfair, but I think people know that. And that's the basic fact. And secondly, They launched the missiles near Taiwan. They, as planned, 6 military drill zone around Taiwan. All that is because of Pelosi visit? No, because of President Xi Jinping. He is losing his face. He needs an outlet. He needs an outlet to let China inside pressure, release that kind of pressure. So all the military exercises, all the missiles launches over Taiwan, it's not because of what Taiwan or Pelosi or the international society, what we have done something wrong. No, just because Xi Jinping, he needs this to release inside the domestic pressure. And according to our intelligence, there is no evidence PLA, their assembly, their military resources, and their logistics system try to mobilize their military across the strait. There is no evidence for now. So our military, our National Defense Department, and I believe our allies all watching PLA's moves closely and cautiously. We don't want to start a conflict, but we are not afraid if some dictator country try to invade our country.
While there are US naval vessels in the waters around Taiwan, one of the big fears is whether Beijing will want to enforce a naval blockade of the island country. And if it were to do so, do you think that China can pull off a naval blockade of Taiwan? What are your plans to fight back, and how apprehensive are you about such a scenario unfolding?
Yeah, I have to say, that's China's strategy. They try to blockade allies' help from northeast, like United States forces in Okinawa, or even Japanese military. They try to blockade it and isolate Taiwan. Then they can use in their outnumbered military forces, amphibious, and warship to try to invade Taiwan. That's their strategic plan. However, they don't have enough capacity to carry out this right now. They are working on that. We know that. They try to build more and more new amphibious boats. China try to establish new missile system, and they try to build new fighters. Yeah, they are getting stronger. However, Taiwan, we are not sitting here and wait our enemy to invade us. We try to using our budget to build asymmetric capacity to defend our country. And in the past 5 years, under the leadership of our President Tsai Ing-wen, we have reorganized and enhanced our military capacity. And we have a lot of cooperation with our allies, such as the United States. So if China try to block Taiwan's the near ocean, I think that's their plan, but they have no enough capacity to carry it out.
While Speaker Pelosi came to Taiwan, President Biden didn't seem so enthusiastic. He even said publicly that the American military was advising against this visit. So it almost seems as if an 82-year-old speaker went despite the president from her own party asking her not to. How confident are you, if push comes to shove, that the United States will shed its strategic ambiguity and indeed come to Taiwan's military aid?
Yeah, that's a good question. First, to protect our country is our own responsibility. Taiwan survive cannot rely on international friends' help. With friends' help, that's good, but our preparation and our Taiwanese strategy is to defend our country even without foreign help. So that's our best design for this. And do we have confidence for United States to give us a hand? We don't calculate that, but we do know Taiwan is important. We are in a very key position in the first island chain. If China take over Taiwan, Japan, 90% of their resources, their power supply transportation line need to pass through the sea around Taiwan. So if China dominates Taiwan, then that means Japan needs to rely on Chinese mercy to have their power supply. Secondly, if the democracies lose Taiwan, China take over Taiwan, that means first island chain will be disappear. Then United States need to move back to Guam, even Hawaii. So Taiwan is important. But also in supply chain, our semiconductor industrial, in a lot of fields, Taiwan is a key supplier to the world. So we do prepare, we do want to protect, it's our own responsibility. However, I don't think to sit and watch China invade Taiwan meet international interest. And my last word is about Biden review about their Pentagon evaluation about Pelosi's visit. You know, if China intimidates United States in public, that will be a stupid tactic. If China try to use a military way to scale Pelosi visit away, they need to do that in private. If that goes public, November as there will be an election in United States. So if this situation goes to public, it's like to negotiate with terrorists. So when Biden speaks to the media, say, yeah, Pentagon evaluation, maybe it's not a good idea right now. It's kind of evaluation. Pentagon won't interfere political decision in United States. So to reveal that kind of information, what's the purpose? I have no idea, but I do know, including Biden, President Biden, and the bipartisan in Capitol Hill, Taiwan do have strong link, do have strong connection with United States. We trust our friends, but we depend on ourselves to defend my
And
country.
finally, you know, India and Taiwan are aligned in many ways. You've got China aggressively flexing its military muscles around Taiwan, and they're doing the same along the line of actual control. And India fighting and pushing back in quite the same way that Taiwan is. Where do you see the India-Taiwan relationship go from here? What are your expectations from the government of India at this time and the people who are watching you?
You know, in Taiwan, we do think India is a great country. Now, there are only two countries, their population more than 1 billion, India and China. And India is a country with democracy. It's not easy. So when India facing your borderline conflict with China, Taiwan has so-called Taiwan Strait conflict with China. We all are facing this kind of threat, but we keep our democracy and we develop our technology and our economy. So I think Indian friends and the Taiwanese people, we are quite similar, and we have a lot of things can cooperate. For example, like IT industrial, and in something about management and green power. There are a lot of things we can cooperate. We can have work together, and in strategic way. Just imagine Taiwan is in east side, India in west side in this Indo-Pacific region. If we are friends, if we can cooperate, we can keep this region stabilized, prosperous. So maybe we can share the same value, work together, and keep this place in peace and stability, and make China understand follow international regulation.
Yeah.
Don't try using aggressive way to bully your neighbors.
Wang Ting-yu, your spirit is admirable, and the manner in which the government, the legislators and the people of Taiwan are standing up to the world's biggest bully. I promise you that the people of India are fully with you and your cause. Thank you for joining us, Member of Parliament in Taiwan, member of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee of Taiwan, Wang Ting-yu, speaking exclusively there to India today. We wish you well.
Thank you. Thank you.
The big question is, what might happen next? Is a Chinese invasion of Taiwan likely? India Today's Gaurav Sawant decodes the various scenarios that could play out on the seas and in the skies.
After Nancy Pelosi's visit, the situation between Taiwan and China is red hot. The Chinese President Xi Jinping had warned the United States, don't play with fire. Is that fire now spreading? What could happen? The encirclement of Taiwan, live fire drills, fighter jets crossing the median line. But is that just the beginning? Military analysts and wargamers almost across the world are looking at this situation. Could we see an escalation? What would that escalation be? Could that escalation be China occupying Taiwan's outlying islands? And this would be seen as a major escalation. Occupying some of these islands and then looking at the scenario developing. Some of the experts and analysts have warned this could lead to artillery duels, the use of long-range artillery, the use of missiles, the use of air power. Live firing drills already between the 4th and the 7th are on. Chinese warships could then enter the Taiwan Straits and cross the median. That again would be a cause for grave concern. Warships and fighter jets. China could well block Taiwan from reinforcing its islands, its forces on ground. Again, a cause for concern. Now, what would Taiwan do in such a situation? Would Taiwan then use its missile batteries? Taiwan has very effectively deployed its batteries for the protection of its main island. Could those be activated? And would this then lead to further escalation? Remember, China has already said it will not wait indefinitely for reunification of Taiwan with mainland China. Does that mean the use of force and escalation in that use of force? Would that timeline be shrunk? They will not wait till 2049. It could happen within the next 18 to 24 months is one appreciation. Once you encircle Taiwan, you restrict ships coming in, you restrict the airspace. This could actually lead to more Chinese warships encircling Taiwan. Some of it has happened, more barriers being put in place. Taiwan, of course, all indications are not in favor of reunification. Does this then take this conflict to the next level? China, of course, then escalates this to an all-out blockade, activates a no-fly zone. As of now, it's temporary. There is a maritime notification with conventional missiles being fired. At least that's what China is saying. Will the United States and Japan get activated? Japan already very uncomfortable about Chinese warships in these waters. They threaten Japan's islands too. Will the US Pacific Command then get activated? Again, a cause for concern. Do you see a Navy-to-Navy conflict escalating? China then unleashes its air and missile campaign. This then is an all-out war scenario. China strikes Taiwan's ports, cities and bases. Taiwan enters the invasion-ready mode. That again has been wargamed. But what does this entail? This entails all-out use of Taiwan's air power, missile power, submarine power, naval power, ships being activated. Step 11, China begins its big amphibious exercise to occupy mainland, Taiwan's main islands. It's been wargaming it. Easier said than done. Very effective protection that Taiwan has in place. But then this would actually lead to that final battle. Taiwan, to protect democracy, to protect its people, Taiwan could well unleash its long-range missiles. The question remains, will the United States of America, Japan and Australia mount counter-strikes on China? And would this then lead to a nuclear Armageddon as warned by some in China?
The heightened tensions between China, Taiwan and the United States pose one of the biggest geopolitical risks at this moment. And no one's quite certain about what happens next. To get a sense of the various scenarios that could unravel from here on, I'm joined on this broadcast live from the United States by Ian Bremmer, leading political scientist, author. He teaches at Columbia University, columnist at Time, president of the Eurasia Group and one of the world's leading experts on political risk. He's the founder of the Eurasia Group. So his task is really to look at all the risks as they unfold across the world and get a sense of what could happen next at a time when nobody really knows the answer to that. So Ian Bremmer, welcome. It's good to connect after the World Economic Forum.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
We have at this moment a very dangerous situation that seems to be building with China flexing its military muscles around Taiwan. Where do you see the situation go from here? The biggest question when it comes to risk at this moment is, could this muscle flexing in some way escalate into military confrontation?
Look, whenever you have these sorts of unprecedented military exercises and activities, people can always miscalculate, you can always have a mistake, and that's a very dangerous time. But I do want to be clear that the Biden administration has itself tried hard to deliver a message that the intention of the United States is not to change its long-stated policy of strategic ambiguity. Speaker Pelosi, her trip was obviously very provocative. Biden did not want her to go, but once she decided she was going anyway, she did take steps to try to limit how much of a confrontation could come from it. So, for example, she took a much longer flight route to Taiwan to avoid flying through or over contested airspace in the South China Sea. When she was in Taiwan, she explicitly acknowledged that she supports the U.S. policy of strategic ambiguity. There was nothing new in the statements that Pelosi had made on the ground in Taiwan or during her meeting with President Tsai Ing-wen. So from the American side, again, this trip itself is a provocation. The trip itself comes at a time that is seen as a loss of face by the Chinese. They had warned the Americans, so they are going to take escalatory steps in return, in retaliation. But I do think that while we're seeing escalation, we are not seeing an effort to create a crisis by China, and there is calibration in the steps that have been announced to date by the mainland Chinese so far.
Is this where it could stop? Because we've seen some additional bans on Taiwanese exports to China, but as you said, it hasn't been hugely escalatory and definitely not from a military perspective. Given that President Xi has a big Communist Party Congress coming up in October, will economic sanctions and some military maneuvers suffice, or do you think he's just building it up to something more ominous?
Look, I think it will suffice for now. These are the most significant military operations that the Chinese government have taken. And I mean, they exceed what we saw during the 1995-96 Taiwan crisis, and were clearly intended to be seen as such by the Chinese government. And again, if you're doing live fire missile exercises over the Taiwanese land, then there's a possibility that something can screw up and people can get killed. So, I mean, you are taking calculated risks here. I don't want to underestimate the importance of that. You've got, both sides on military high alert. There's always the possibility that something goes wrong. But you're right that I think that by itself is probably sufficient in terms of the immediate Chinese reaction. There is a bigger question about during the party Congress will the Chinese government change unilaterally what they consider to be acceptable and unacceptable forms of Taiwanese self-governance in terms of the business community, in terms of pressure on the ruling DPP. I think that those things are indeed possible. And, it's an interesting dynamic here about who it is we need to watch more closely in this tense relationship, Taiwan, China, or the United States. I would argue that the most uncertain player down the road is actually the United States. This crisis came because President Biden was unable to convince a senior member of his own party to go along with his foreign policy. She just decided that she's 82 years old, she's almost done with her political career, and she was going to make a statement. Didn't matter if her president agreed with her or not. And the Chinese see that as both an escalation, but also an opportunity for them to essentially put Taiwan in a more difficult position without risking further American pushback, because they know the Biden administration doesn't want that. I think we can see more of that going forward. Let me go forward to 2024. What would happen if, in that case, the United States government had a constitutional crisis in the upcoming election, and for a period of weeks or months, we don't really know who the president is, and you have some really strong and hostile statements about China and Taiwan that are being made, for example, on the Republican side at that point. I could see the Chinese seeing that as a big opportunity to further change the status quo in their favor. In other words, that the provocations come from the U.S., the feeling of opportunity that the Americans are incapable of acting coherently comes from the U.S., and that's when China, led all the way through by Xi Jinping with a long-term perspective that, they're going to reunify Taiwan into the mainland by hook or by crook, this is their chance to shake the branches and see if any fruit falls off. That's not an amphibious military invasion. That's not a sudden taking over of Taiwan, but it is absolutely these salami tactics where whenever they see an opportunity, they're gonna grab a little bit more. That is, I think, what we're seeing today is a precursor of the way this is likely to play out from China's perspective over a long period of time.
That's very interesting that you mentioned that salami slicing is likely the way that this battle could go. And nobody wants to use the W word very casually. But given what's happened between Russia and Ukraine, the prospect of war stares the world in its face and is in everyone's mind. It is true that Taiwan's defenses are planned like that of a porcupine. It's very difficult for an invading army, no matter what kind of amphibious weapon systems and vehicles they have, to come in and capture an island. If it were to lead to escalation, given that in Galwan we saw anything which is beyond known protocols can suddenly escalate in an unplanned fashion, what does a military conflict, in your view, between Taiwan and China look like?
It's a military conflict that includes an amphibious assault across a 100-mile water strait. It's very hard to come up with conditions that would be more inopportune for the Chinese government. And this is on the back of China watching how badly the Russian army has been unprepared for the Russia-Ukraine fight. And that's an army that has been involved in a lot more direct military operations than the Chinese military has. If there are any lessons that come from Ukraine, it's that the Chinese government understands they need to sharpen their pencils as to the readiness of their own military for operations in the future. So, I think the Chinese government understands that both militarily, a invasion might go very, very badly for their leadership, and also economically, where you would be, this is not like Hong Kong, where it's just a couple % of China GDP, but there's nothing strategic about the economy, and it's no longer as important as a gateway to finance and trade and investment to the mainland. Taiwan is responsible for almost all of the advanced semiconductor chips that China desperately needs for their own industry. And if there were a war over Taiwan, TSMC would be destroyed. And so, that risk to the Chinese economy, I think, is also something that they would be very, very loath to take. So if we're talking about direct military confrontation, we're really talking about something that's not planned, something that's an accident that gets out of control, and something that even in that scenario, I think both countries would be very deeply reluctant to take direct steps that would bring you to actual war. I don't think there are not many people, at least politically, that I talk to on any side of the political spectrum that believe that war over Taiwan is near term a likely outcome.
From all of what you're picking up from China, is it certain or near certain in your view that Xi Jinping will get another term and become president for life? Or do you think there is a prospect that given that we're not fully seeing and reading what's playing out, that there could be a question mark around that come October?
Look, the Chinese political leadership has not been traveling. Xi Jinping went to Hong Kong. That's it since the pandemic started. This is a much more locked down, much more isolated leadership. So anyone that tells you with certainty that they can predict what's going to happen in a government that is famously opaque to begin with is lying to you. But certainly the level of political consolidation that Xi Jinping has managed to gain, and you see this playing out with the economic policies and statements and the follow through on the back of when he makes them. You see it militarily. You see it with the press coverage of Xi Jinping over and above that of any other leader, and consistently for years now. There are no indications that there is a meaningful threat to Xi's efforts to secure for himself a third term. Now, securing a third term and saying that this is going to be leader for life are two radically different things. And I noticed you conflated the two. Let's be very clear that China's economy is very significantly underperforming, in part because of zero COVID, and also in part because they haven't been able to address non-performing loans. They haven't been able to redress the big challenges they have in banks, some of which rural banks have just recently gone bankrupt. They also have a massive demographic challenge that is going to constrain growth and productivity in China. The next 5 to 10 years, where Xi Jinping is expected to be leading, will be of unprecedented economic challenge for the Chinese leadership. I would not want to make long-term predictions about what that means for stability inside the Chinese Communist Party.
That there is so much tension now between China and Taiwan. How is this likely to impact Beijing's posture towards New Delhi? At this moment, we have a big part of the People's Liberation Army amassed along India's border with China along the line of actual control. Those tensions haven't really subsided. They've come down just a notch, but the army still remain deployed at the heights. Would China keep both fronts active at the same time, or do you think that the tensions with Taiwan increase the prospects of China wanting to cool tensions with India at least to a greater extent?
I think it depends on the topic. The Chinese, when they're thinking about their position in the world, for example, in response to the Russia-Ukraine crisis, China sees itself as more in the developing country pool. The Chinese are buying more oil and gas from the Russians. So are the Indians by a very large margin. When you talk about climate change, China's per capita carbon use is actually now higher than the EU, believe it or not, which is kind of an astonishing piece of data. Still a lot less than the United States. But China thinks of itself as a poorer country that should be provided much more support if we're going to decarbonize more quickly from the developed world, much as India does. So, I mean, there are various aspects of geopolitics today and the new global order where China and India are in reality more aligned, even if their diplomats are still fairly frosty to each other. But when we talk specifically about international security, when we talk about technology companies and applications that are seen to be critical or at least overlapping in the security area. These are areas where China and India, of course, have extremely tense relations, and it's very hard to see that that's going to calm, even given what we're presently seeing over Taiwan. India, of course, is a member of the Quad in good standing. Prime Minister Modi has only shown that he wants to improve and strengthen that organization over time. That is seen by China as part of an effort of the United States to contain China's relationships and interests in their own backyard in Asia, very analogous to the way that Putin sees the United States and the West as trying to contain Russia in Europe. And that, of course, was the reason why we saw the two of those world leaders stand together on February 4th and announce their global friendship without limits. I think that that's going to be very hard to change in India's favor on the China relations front in the near term.
Finally, what does this mean for the relationship between Beijing and DC? We saw President Biden say publicly that he didn't want Speaker Pelosi, or the military didn't think that this was a good idea. Speaker Pelosi went nonetheless. Will the American administration now try to dial down the tensions, or given that China has taken such a belligerent position, relations between China and Washington are likely to get worse from here?
The Americans will try not to further escalate on the back of what the Chinese are presently doing. If the Chinese limit themselves in the near term to these unprecedented military operations and limit themselves to the sanctions on sand and on agribusiness that we have seen so far, I expect that there will be virtually no additional U.S. response other than diplomatic posturing to China. And ultimately, that will be seen by Beijing as a long-term win, changing the balance of power oh so slightly in Beijing's favor compared to where it had been heretofore. Keep in mind that before Pelosi went to Taipei, the single policy that Biden was working most assiduously on towards China was to try to remove some of the Trump-era economic tariffs on China, because Biden is most vulnerable at home in the United States on the inflation front. And he had been speaking with a number of CEOs directly in the U.S. saying, what could we do that would have the greatest impact? What goods could we take those tariffs off of? And by the way, the official U.S. position is that that tariff reduction is still being considered, even as the Chinese engage in unprecedented military operations surrounding Taiwan. So I don't think Biden and Xi Jinping know each other reasonably well. They've spent a lot of time together, both as presidents, but also when both were vice president. That's something that Biden privately talks about a lot. He cares about individual diplomacy. I think he's going to try to rely on the fact that that relationship will keep the U.S.-China relations from going off the rails in the near term.
Some really sharp insights over the last several minutes. Ian Bremmer, thank you so much for joining us. We will keep coming back to you over the weeks as the situation unfolds from here. One of the world's leading political scientists, risk experts, Ian Bremmer, there speaking exclusively to the Newstrack. Thank you, Ian.
My pleasure.
We'll continue tracking the China-Taiwan story closely when I come back on the other side of a quick break. BJP mocks Congress CM face Nataka, DK Shivkumar Siddaramaiah hug on Rahul Gandhi's queue. Saffron Party calls it staged bonhomie. Details coming up on the other side.
अभी तक 56 से भी ज़्यादा स्टार्टअप्स मैंने खोले हैं और उस पर काम कर रहा हूँ, जिसमें से कुछ के नाम ये हैं। जैस एक्सप्रेस जो कि एक मीडिया और न्यूज़ वेबसाइट है, शादी कीजिए जो कि एक मैट्रिमोनियल वेबसाइट है, जैस बिजनेस जो कि एक क्विक कॉमर्स और ई कॉमर्स कंपनी है, मंत्राफाई जो कि एक डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड ऑटोमेटिक इन्वेस्टमेंट प्लेटफॉर्म है जो कि क्रिप्टो करेंसी की कंपनी है, मंत्रा कॉइन जो कि खुद ही क्रिप्टो करेंसी है। टेक क्रंच अमेरिका की लीडिंग मीडिया एजेंसी है जिसमें दुनिया के 7 करोड़ एंटरप्रेन्योर, स्टार्टअप फाउंडर्स और बिजनेसमैन का डाटा रखा रहता है। उसी की सब्सिडियरी कंपनी क्रंच बेस जो कि पूरे दुनिया के 7 करोड़ लोगों का डाटा रखती है, जिसमें मेरा रैंक 14 आया है। क्रंच बेस पे मेरी 30 से ज़्यादा ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस लिस्टेड हैं और मेरा रैंक मिस्टर बिल गेट्स, सर रतन टाटा, मिस्टर मुकेश अंबानी जी, मिस्टर मार्क जकरबर्ग, मिस्टर आनंद महिंद्रा, मिस्टर गौतम अडानी, इन सब से ज़्यादा। तो मिस्टर वॉरेन बफेट, मिस्टर बिल गेट्स और मिस्टर मार्क जकरबर्ग, इन सब की वीडियोस देख के मैं मोटिवेट हुआ था बिजनेस ये सब स्टार्ट करने के लिए। ये बिजनेस के दिग्गज बिलियनियर्स और एंटरप्रेन्योर्स हैं, इनसे मैं मोटिवेट होता हूँ अगर, और क्रंच बेस में मैं इनसे आगे निकल रहा हूँ तो ये मेरे लिए बहुत गर्व की बात है। मेरी सारी कंपनियां लॉन्च हो रही हैं क्योंकि ये तो डिजिटल बिजनेस है। हम लोग इसे पूरी तरीके से मार्केट में उतारने के लिए आपको 3 से 4 महीने लगेंगे, जिसमें हमारी सारी कंपनी मार्केट में आ जाएंगी। फाइनेंशियल माहौल एक और था हमारे फैमिली में, जिसके कारण 2021 के जून के बाद ये इंटरेस्ट जगा और अभी तक मैंने 56 से भी ज़्यादा स्टार्टअप्स खोले हैं और उस पर काम कर रहा हूँ। इसमें मेरी मदद करते हैं मेरे पापा और मेरे कंपनी के 5 को-फाउंडर्स हैं जिनकी मैं सहायता लेता हूँ काम करने में।
काफी खुशी की बात है कि इतना छोटा बच्चा जब खेलने कूदने का उम्र होता है, इतने छोटे बच्चों को लोग स्कूल जाने के लिए समझाते हैं, इसके उम्र के बच्चों को एक मोटिवेशन दे रहा है और देगा। और मेरी उम्मीद है कि जितनी लगन से यह कार्य कर रहा है यह काफी आगे जाएगा।
This Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara dreams may soon turn into a reality. The Union Ministry of Civil Aviation has unveiled a new policy on air sports. It aims to make India one of the top destinations in this field by 2030. Let's have a look at the new National Air Sports Policy. What are air sports? Air sports contain a range of aerial activities. It includes air racing, aerobatics,
You're on board the Newstrack. There is no end to the Congress Nataka. In Karnataka, a new video showing Rahul Gandhi prodding DK Shivkumar to hug Siddaramaiah at a public function to mark the latter's 75th birthday has triggered a political storm. The BJP mocking the Congress, asking where is party unity and why does RG need to stage the hug?
ಒಂದು ಸುಂದರವಾದಂತ ಒಂದು ನೋಟ ಇದು. Thank you.
Two warring Karnataka Congress satraps embracing. It should be music to Congress ears. But alas, it may have been a forced show of bonhomie. Look closely and you can see Rahul Gandhi prodding bitter rivals DKS and Siddaramaiah to kiss and make up. The gesture from Rahul did manage to do the trick for the cameras. And the two Cong stalwarts indeed hugged. But the opposition BJP, which tweeted the video, is already poking fun at Congress, calling it a staged show to brush the internal power feud under the carpet.
Mr. DK Shivkumar, out of compulsion, attended yesterday birthday bash of Siddaramaiah. Even there, he was not harmonious towards him. When Rahul Gandhi prompted him to hug Siddaramaiah, only then he did it. It is only, the optics is only for public consumption.
Congress, for the record, continues to claim that all is well in its Karnataka wing.
No. See, Congress, there is no tussle for chief ministerial post because Congress always have had a stand that whenever we have elections, we get our own numbers. After that, the legislature party will meet. The members' opinion will be taken. Then, based on the opinion, the High Command will decide the chief ministerial candidate.
Earlier, it was a cake-cutting moment that the Congress used to project that DKS and Siddaramaiah have buried the hatchet. After the bruising battle over who gets to be the projected Congress CM face. Rahul Gandhi had specially flown down to enforce a truce in its war-torn Karnataka unit. But is his Herculean effort proving to be a flimsy patch-up, which may boomerang for Congress like the Channi Sidhu episode in Punjab? With Nagarjun Dwarkanath in Bengaluru, Bureau Report, India Today.
This is where I wrap up the Newstrack tonight. For your time and your trust, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye, good night.
देखिए, पहले तो 5 से 10,000 20,000 तक तिरंगे बनते थे और उसके बाद फिर इमरजेंसी में तिरंगे बने। इसके बाद फिर अन्ना हजारे के दौर में ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा 20-25 हज़ार तिरंगे रोज़ बनाए थे। अब तो हम कम से कम 1 लाख डेली बना रहे हैं और लोग भी बना रहे हैं उसको, और फिर भी डिमांड पूरी नहीं हो पा रही है। ऐसी बड़ी डिमांड हमने 65 साल से पहले कभी नहीं देखी, जितना अभी हमारे को बल्क में काम करना पड़ रहा है और 24 घंटे काम कर रहे हैं। इसके बावजूद भी ये पूरा होना बहुत मुश्किल लग रहा है। फिर भी हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि घर घर झंडा पहुँचे। रोज़ डेली 500-600 फ़ोन आते हैं, जिसमें हम अपने जो कस्टमर हैं पुराने, उनका ये फ़ोन सुन पा रहे हैं, ताकि और पहले से ऑर्डर ले रखे हैं हमने, जो उनको ही पूरा करना है हमें। पहले नया ऑर्डर अभी कोई नहीं ले रहे हैं। ये जो अभियान है ये बहुत अच्छा है। इसमें एक तो देश के गरीब लोग भी काम कर रहे हैं और लेडीज़ ज़्यादा काम कर रही हैं, ताकि उनको कुछ रोज़गार मिल पाए। इस काम के लिए हमारे फैमिली के 50 लोग हैं, वो तो लगे हुए हैं। इसके अलावा हमारे पास 500 मशीनें हैं, जो लेडीज़ भी हैं, उसमें जेंट्स भी हैं, हिंदू भी हैं, मुसलमान भी हैं। सबको कम से कम 80% मुस्लिम लोग भी काम कर रहे हैं इसमें। अभी हमारे पास कम से कम 500 लोग काम कर रहे हैं और हो सकता है हम 150 लोग और बढ़ाएं। ये हमारे व्यापारी हैं, महाराष्ट्र जा रहा है, उड़ीसा जा रहा है, आसाम जा रहा है, यूपी जा रहा है, और तुम्हारा छत्तीसगढ़, झारखंड, पूरी इंडिया में हमारा झंडे जा रहे हैं।
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices.